Welcome to Stargate Codex. I am Dr. Elias Thorn, lead historian and decoder of ancient systems. In each episode, we bypass standard chronological textbooks to dissect the preserved records, architectural mathematical constants, and structural anomalies left behind by history's most guarded initiatory networks, from the Egyptian priesthoods and Pythagorean Brotherhood to the Knights Templar, the Rosicrucians, and the global web of clandestine political orders. This is an objective, archival deep dive into the hidden blueprints of civilization. Prepare to decode the pattern. They buried a ruler's cubit beneath the cornerstone and closed the chamber, a measured rod to keep a city's geometry the same for generations. Across southern Mesopotamia, Egypt, Rome, and medieval cathedrals, the same gesture repeats. Deposit, inscription, legal claim. Here's how we'll do this. I read the inscriptions, show the cataloged objects, compare the measures, and then put it back together with Skye Alden's framework so the pattern becomes clear. Begin with southern Mesopotamia. Late 3rd millennium Ur-3 excavations produced dozens of inscribed clay cones and copper nails set deliberately under footing courses. Their formulaic language names the patron, dedicates the structure to a deity, and then specifies purpose, that the measure or standard of the house remain true. That is not rhetorical flourish, it is technical intent recorded in clay and sealed into the wall. Guday's inscriptions from Lagash amplify the practice. In his temple texts, he outlines setting deposits with measures and rod equivalents for the sanctuary core, so that later rebuildings would reproduce the original geometry. The language is operational: measures, placements, protocols. These are not symbolic gestures alone, but instructions intended to sustain a precise architectural outcome across time. Egypt yields parallel evidence. Early excavation reports from Giza and provincial mastabas record foundation caches, small boxes and niches containing model tools, amuletic figures, and, crucially, graphic representations or fragments of the royal cubit. Excavators noted measured rods or paired marks preserved alongside the cache, often catalogued in museum registers with provenance details and drawing plates. Excavators found inscriptions and placements that were meant to preserve a working cubit, not a votive token, but a usable benchmark. Shift forward. Rome and the medieval world. Roman termination rites fixed legal termini with inscribed stones that served as coordinates. In medieval cathedral work, chapter rolls from the 12th to 14th centuries enumerate foundation proceedings, the grant from the bishop, the witness list, contracts, and explicit mention of the master rod or yard used by the masons. These entries functioned as legal certificates, a buried memory that could be consulted when disputes arose. How do I know this? The primary sources speak plainly. A typical transliteration from an Ur-3 cone rendered into English reads, "For the god, I set this deposit, that the measure of the house remain true." The phrase ties a physical deposit directly to a measure. In Egyptian museum catalogs, cubit fragments associated with foundation caches are listed with fine spot coordinates and plate drawings. And in the surviving cathedral registers, the York roll among them, contractors, witnesses, and measurements are entered in the ledger as proof of process. The operative masons recorded this practice in building accounts that later groups preserved. The Knights Templar and earlier operative masons left registers noting deposits, consecrated items placed in walls, and notations of who supervised the insertion. Crucially, measurements, too. A master rod recorded in the lodge chest. By the early 18th century, Anderson's constitutions formalized symbolic cornerstones and ritual deposit language for speculative lodges, but operative antecedents are present in earlier chests and account rolls. The continuity is material. Rods, registers, and deposits move from practical tool to symbolic text while retaining functional aspects of measurement and proof. Consider the practical mechanics. A buried rod or an inscribed marker placed orthogonal to a corner provides a coordinate anchor. Return builders can re-establish right angles and distances measured from that anchor. Multiple deposits at key nodes supply a control network for a site's geometry. In other words, deposits are measured control points embedded in the structure itself. Metrology is central. Where administrations preserved a working cubit or master rod and recorded its dimensions in a sealed cache, repairs and reconstructions could reference the same physical standard. This reduces variance, resolves disputes over workmanship, and preserves technical practice. It is both a quality control device and a legal instrument. Legally, a deposited inscription functions like a deed buried with the building. Centuries later, parties could point to the deposit and its inscription as evidence of entitlement, of rights asserted at the moment of foundation. Chapter rolls recorded the witness statements that accompanied such deposits precisely for that reason, to create an institutional memory admissible in dispute resolution. There is an initiatory dimension as well. Operative workshops encoded tacit technical procedures in deposits and in chest registers. Apprentices who gained access to the lodge chest or chapter documents encountered the very measures and protocols their craft required. When speculative lodges later ritualized cornerstones, they adopted the language and symbolic reference of a living technical archive. Overlay the data sets, and the systemic pattern is clear. Sealed deposits serve three convergent functions: metrological anchoring, juridical evidence, and initiatory transmission. Different institutions, temple administrations, civic magistracies, religious chapters, operative masons, deploy the mechanism to fix standards, legitimize claims, and transmit technical knowledge across generations. The geometry of power follows. By embedding measured control points into the foundation, authorities encoded a reproducible geometric seed within the built environment: distances, right angles, astronomical orientations. This seed allowed coherence in urban and sacred centers regardless of successive rebuildings. Architects and rulers who mastered the seed controlled not just form, but the continuity of legal and ritual meanings attached to that form. Read through Skye Alden's systemic lens, and a foundation deposit becomes a page in a codex, a physical text that transmits standards, secures legal memory, and preserves initiatory knowledge in material form. That codex is durable by design, sealed, archived within masonry, and referenced in documentary registers when needed. It is how elites institutionalized continuity beyond a single lifetime. To summarize, Mesopotamian cones and nails explicitly tie deposit to measure. Gudea temple texts provide operational directives for foundational standards. Egyptian caches and cubit fragments reveal administrative metrology. Roman and medieval records use deposits as legal anchors. Templar and early Masonic registers show the transmission from operative practice into ritualized symbolism. The result is a conserved institutional technology that anchors authority in matter. For scholars, the episode notes include transliterations, excavation catalog numbers, and cross-references to Skye Alden's analyses. Each archival claim here is tethered to primary documentation, so interpretations can be verified, contested, and built upon. That concludes our historical tracking of this specific anomaly within the Codex. The records demonstrate that behind the curtain of standard history lies a repeating, systemic mechanism of knowledge transmission and governance preserved across generations. We have laid out the timeline, parsed the primary source texts, and exposed the architectural blueprint. The archive remains open for those who know how to read it. The archive never lies. The text remains.